I don't fold my underwear. I just shove it all in like a little cubby thing, and that's good to go.
I like how she goes on to say, I bet Sam folds his underwear.
Yes.
And I'm like, you know what? I bet he fucking does. I bet Kale folds his underwear too.
Probably.
Not Dorian, though.
That's crazy behavior. Who's out here folding their underwear? Like, why? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering the third story in Assassin's Blade, titled The Assassin and the Desert. This was a pretty exciting story. I thought there was a lot of action in here, while simultaneously also being very emotional, given Ansel's betrayal and everything.
I found myself much more emotionally invested in this story than, dare I say, the whole series. I mean, certainly more than anything we've read in Assassin's Blade. And honestly, even more so than TOG and maybe Calm. I don't know. There was something about it that was really just nicely done. Because I feel like in this story, there's really no villain other than like Lord Beric. I really feel for Ansel, but I don't know. I found myself very moved, especially at the end when she talks to the Mute Master too.
That's true. I mean, I'm not going to say I like Ansel by any means, because like that's really fucking shitty and fucked up what she did.
I like Ansel. I don't approve of what she did.
Yeah.
But I understand why she did what she did. Because
that's true, yeah.
Which we'll talk about as we get into the episode. I feel like there are a lot of parallels you can draw between Celaena and Ansel. And I'm not confident that if Celaena were in the same position that she wouldn't be doing the same thing. So, I don't know. There's a lot to think about and digest with this story.
That's true. I was going to say, well, Celaena didn't betray people, but then I was like, well, she did become I don't know.
Yeah.
I still was like, Ansel.
Not black and white, is it?
I know. But I did feel like Celaena is officially embracing round one of change of her life for the better, though, after this experience. Like, I think that this story was when she officially makes the decision she's going to try and make a change in her life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than that, I thought it was nice.
Yeah.
As a quick reminder, we will be discussing this short story in Assassin's Blade specifically, but it is likely that references to Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight will come up as well. If you haven't started TOG yet, and you don't want any spoilers, then please pause here and then come back when you're caught up. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series, but of course, you'll get plenty of unhinged theories, so beware. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are enjoying this podcast so far, then the very best way for you to support the show is to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review or rating, and then, share it with your friends. This greatly helps us on the podcast platform so we can grow our community of book lovers and continue making content for everyone.
I don't know if you guys are like me, but I have so many friends who got introduced to Sarah J. Maas through ACOTAR, and they've just finished the ACOTAR series, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm reeling, I'm dying. What do I read next? Steer them to Throne of Glass. I highly encourage you. Well, there are many wonderful fantasy series out there that they are, of course, welcome to read. And Crescent City is also great. I really feel like Throne of Glass is a really nice way to transition from ACOTAR. You still feel like you're immersed in the world, so to speak.
Yeah, it's the Sarah J. Maas pipeline introduced via ACOTAR.
Tell your friends
to Throne of Glass, reads Crescent City, and so on.
Tell your friends to get their fix with us, okay? To feed their addiction with us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the good thing is if you start it now, then you have several episodes of backlog content because we've already covered Throne of Glass and we've already covered Crown of Midnight. And yeah, it's great. It's fun. Join the party. So next week, we will read the next short story, which is titled The Assassin and the Underworld. In addition, if you love House of the Dragon, then we have got you covered. We are continuing to do weekly reviews for each episode in season 2, and the season finale is next week. but it's never too late to start listening.
Never. Even if you're coming to this months or years afterwards.
Exactly. Hey, when season 3 rolls around in a couple years, we'll be here for you to recap. So
you hear that, guys? You can trust us. We're not going anywhere.
We're stubborn, if anything. So, and then finally, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
Okay, today is the day we're recording this. Yep, that is an accurate statement.
I was just gonna say you sounded like Siri when you said
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Here are so many days.
Here is the Onyx Storm countdown. Man, guys. If you've made it this far already, just go get a glass of wine. Just go get a glass of wine and get in the bathtub and just... This
not
is
even
going to be that kind of episode.
Either. I know.
That's the worst part. That is the worst part. I wish I was drunk right now. Okay. Today, the day we were recording this, it is July 30th. And as of today, there are 175 days until Onyx Storm is released. Yay!
Obligatory, yay!
Yay! All right. Only 175 more days until he can stop doing this.
I've seen like a recycling of media posts and content about it now, though.
That's good. Yeah. Well, and friendly reminder, guys, I know we discussed this in last week's episode, but Lorraine and I are actively working on a schedule for the next few Throne of Glass books as well as Onyx Storm. So we will keep you posted. So just be on the lookout on our socials for that.
Yes. Stick with us. Don't go anywhere. Please. Pretty please. All right. That is all for housekeeping. So on to the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries. Then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments as well. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Okay. Buckle up, everybody, because, well, I mean, I'm sure you guys know because you're reading along. This story was 100 pages long. So this is the longest summary I've ever had to write. So I tried to be as concise as possible and doing justice to the material. So with that being said, I know there are 12 chapters. Just like all the other tab episodes, I will just be doing one complete summary for the entire story. Okay, here we go. The Assassin and the Desert. Or if you're Addison, The Assassin and the Dessert. Which would also make an excellent short story and would fit Celaena's character. So maybe someday. Okay. Sand. There was sand everywhere. So much sand that Celaena was sure there was nothing left in the world but her and the sands of the Red Desert. That is, until she arrived at the Silent Assassin's fortress. Upon arrival, she meets with the Mute Master who seems to approve. That is, until he snaps his fingers and 4 of the Mute Master's men charge her. But of course, our girl kicks some ass and handles the men with relative ease. After she has dispatched them, she is introduced to Ansel, a fellow assassin who we learn has been at the keep since she was 13 years old and has never been trained by the Mute Master himself. Ansel takes Celaena to the bathing chamber, and Celaena takes a much-needed bath. When Celaena returns to the room she is to share with Ansel for the next month, she quickly falls asleep and dreams about the night she and Sam returned from Skull's Bay. The day she and Sam returned changed everything. An irate Arobynn has 3 men hold Sam and makes him watch as he beats Celaena unconscious. The last thing she remembers is feeling guilty for getting blood on Arobynn's exquisite red carpet. Fuck Arobynn, am I right?
I wouldn't feel sorry about that at all.
Right? Celaena is awoken by Ansel when it is time for dinner, and the two make their way to the dining hall. Well, there we learn that Lord Beric has spent years trying to get back in the good graces of the King of Adarlan by trying to get to the Mute Master, but all of his attempts have been foiled. We also learn that Ansel has served the role of courier between the Master and Lord Beric, as the Master's goal has always been to make peace between the two. In the words of Fat Amy, don't put me down for cardio. When Celaena awakes the next day, it's time for her training to begin, and by training, they mean running 6 miles carrying buckets. But Celaena is Adarlan's greatest assassin. How bad could it really be? It was immediately awful. Celaena struggles her way through the run, and just when she thinks she won't make it, she crests a dune and sees a beautiful oasis. After enjoying the water, Celaena trudges back to the keep. After dinner, Celaena tries again to explain to the Master that she is there for him to train her, but he smiles and shrugs as if to indicate that Celaena must continue to wait. Each day, Celaena got stronger and better and was able to run a little farther. And the more time she spent with the silent assassins, the more she realized how different their order was to her own, with Arobynn back in Rifthold. Later that evening, Lord Beric tries to attack the keep, but is easily held back by the rigged wall of fire the assassins had waiting. Probably after the attack, the Master orders Ansel to take a letter to Lord Beric. Ansel asks Celaena to accompany her, and Celaena agrees, hoping it will gain her favor with the Master. On the way to Xandria, Ansel tells Celaena about her experience with witches. When Ansel was younger, her older sister and friend Maddie decided to go to the ruins of the Witch Kingdom to see if they really could see into another world. But what they found instead was far more horrific. Ansel was too scared to go all the way into the ruins and was startled when she heard the screams of her sister and Maddie. Ansel and her sister were able to escape and tried to get help for Maddie, but by the time her father and his men got there was no trace of her to be found. Just the clean-picked ivory-white bones of a child. Ansel also tells Celaena the only way to kill a witch is to behead her. Gee, I wonder if this information will come in handy for Celaena later. Once they arrive in Xandria, Celaena is faced with many hard choices while Ansel meets with Lord Beric. Like whether to buy the emerald-pointed shoes with exquisite stitching or the lavender perfume which smelled heavenly. She is distracted from her decisions when she comes across a strange merchant who possesses 100 yards of Stygian spider silk, perhaps the most rare material in all the world. The two have an interesting and somewhat mysterious conversation about how he came to possess a kingdom's worth of wealth, and asks her if she might one day slay the Stygian spider who stole his 20 years. Celaena is interrupted when Ansel storms out and leads her to the stables. Once there, she basically forces Celaena into being her partner in crime. The two take off on the backs of the Asterian mares towards the silent assassin's fortress. The two race like the wind across the desert and toward the keep, but the guards are close behind them. It is only when they make the leap across the desert cleaver that they are able to shake the guards. That night, after making camp, Celaena teaches Ansel about the constellations, and Ansel tells her the truth about her past. Her father didn't send her to the silent assassins. Her father and sister were killed by Lord Locke when he invaded the territory in which they lived. Afterwards, Ansel fled and collapsed at the camp of an iron-teethed witch who told her it was not her fate to die by the hands of a witch, and instead gives her a bag of gold and sends her on her way. Back at the keep, they are taken straight to the Master, who decides to be lenient with their punishment and agrees to put them on stable duty. It is after the Master notices Celaena lies to protect Ansel that he decides to train her. For the next week, Celaena trains with the Master, learning all the ways of the desert animals, but they take a break from their nightly training to celebrate the Midsummer's Eve festival. Celaena is at first hesitant, but eventually, enchanted by the desert and how the silent assassins dance with no music, Celaena dances the night away with Ilias, and as their night comes to a close, almost kisses him, but instead pulls away at the last minute because she can't seem to shake the thought of Sam from her mind. Oh, I'm desperate for Sam to come back into the story. Where is Sam?
I know.
The next morning, Ansel and Celaena are on chore duty and get into a huge fight. Ansel storms off, leaving Celaena to finish her chores alone. That night, Celaena feels monstrously guilty about what happened between her and Ansel. The Master notices Celaena is distracted and gives her the space she needs to admit what is truly bothering her. Celaena is scared to go back home because everything is different. And maybe, just maybe, she wants it to be. And that just might be what scares her the most. Celaena makes her way back to her room and falls asleep instantly and is awoken hours later by Ansel. The two apologize and Ansel offers her a glass of wine to toast their newly repaired friendship. Celaena takes a sip and the world goes black. Celaena awakes in the desert disoriented and confused, but with Casita and a letter from Ansel that shared an odd explanation. Celaena somehow doesn't immediately find this suspicious and makes her way to Xandria. I have thoughts about that. On the way, she sees 200 soldiers on their way to the silent assassin's fortress. Once she arrives in Xandria, she starts to put the pieces together and realizes that something is wrong. Terribly wrong. Celaena jumps on Casita and races faster than the wind back to the keep. When she arrives, she's horrified by what she sees. The walls of the keep have been breached, and both soldier and assassin alike are locked in deadly combat. As she makes her way through the keep, she has the horrible realization that Ansel must be behind this. She rushes to the Master's greeting room and arrives just in time to stop Ansel from beheading the Master. The two argue and duel, but Celaena is ultimately victorious. Instead of ending Ansel's life, she gives her 20 minutes to get her belongings and get out of firing range. After ensuring Ilias and the Master were being tended to, Celaena made her way to the wall of the keep. Celaena fires an arrow and it barely misses Ansel. But Celaena had only promised one arrow. Then again, she only promised 20 minutes. Celaena Sardathian fired her single arrow after 21. Once things settle, the Master calls Celaena to speak with her. The Master begins to actually speak with his physical voice, and Celaena just about falls out of her chair. He thanks her for her help and reveals that he has long known of Ansel's past. He tells Celaena that she will always have a place in the Red Desert and gives her a letter of approval and 3 trunks of gold so that Celaena can pay off her debt to Arobynn and finally be free.
Woo!
And that is the longest summary in the world for the assassin and the desert dessert.
Deserts. I know. That was very long. But you did a good job. Nice job.
Thank you. I tried. There's just so many details. There's so much exposition in this story. And so
Yeah.
I was writing and I'm like, okay, I'm just basically writing the whole chapter. But anyway, here we are.
Perfect. Well, now that we've done the summaries, let's move on to our analysis.
Okay, so before we start the analysis, I have a couple of things I just want to share overall about the story. So the first is, well, I'm just going to get this out of the way so I don't have to think about it anymore. I'm very worried about Sam. I'm really worried about his fate. Celaena thinks a lot about Sam in this story, which means I was thinking a lot about Sam. And the more she thought about them, the more she liked him. And so did I. So I'm very anxious to see what happened to him. I am assuming we'll find out in the very next story because I believe that's when Celaena returns to Rifthold.
I think so too. I have a strong feeling she's going to make moves in the next story. So,
yes. The second thing I want to point out is that this short story has been referenced in both Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. First, in Throne of Glass, I don't have the exact page number because I used my ebook so I could use the search function. So I know the page numbers are a little different. But if you're interested in the reference, it's, I'd say, like about the middle of chapter 13 of Throne of Glass. And the quote reads, "She never had many friends, and the ones she had often disappointed her, sometimes with devastating consequences, as she'd learned this summer with the silent assassins of the Red Desert. After that, she'd sworn never to trust girls again, especially girls with agendas and power of their own, girls who would do anything to get what they wanted." I just love that there is that connection and tie-in to Throne of Glass. And also, I just love that I remember that. So, like, yay me.
Yeah.
I think I remember it because I remember reading that and I'm like, well, what the fuck happened in the Red Desert? Like, we need to know. And this is the story of what happened. And obviously, this is in reference to Ansel. I also want to point out in Throne of Glass, there are several times, well, I should say several, that sounds like a lot. There are a few times where Celaena is described in a certain way, and specifically there's one that reads when she's dueling with Chaol. The description is Celaena moved like a snake in the Red Desert, which I thought was a nice tie-in too, because as we know, a lot of Celaena's training with the Meat Master is mimicking the movements of an asp. And so I thought that was also a nice detailed tie-in between Throne of Glass and Tab. And then last, I'm sure we'll all remember this because Lorraine and I talked about quite a bit from our comm episodes, but when Dorian gifts Chaol with an Asterian stallion at the carnival for his birthday, they have a brief conversation where Celaena mentions that she once stole an Asterian mare from the Lord of Xandria. And of course, they're both like, well, that's a story I have to hear. And unfortunately, Celaena never gets to tell Chaol that story because a lot of shit happens in comm. See previous episodes if you want to know what we're talking about. But I just thought that was also a nice tie-in that this story seems to be really impactful to Celaena in a lot of ways, not just because of the events that transpired, but how it shaped who she is and decisions she makes in the future. And so I wanted to call attention to all of those tie-ins just because I thought that was really nice.
I like that too. That was a nice wrap up of all the references to the other books that we've had so far. So, and I agree. I think that this was a really transformative experience for her. Yeah. And again, I think provided the catalyst experience for her to decide she wanted to change her life.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see where she goes from here. Like in terms of, does she give Arobynn the gold and tell him to fuck off? I do kind of predict that's what she does because I do remember, I want to say it's in Throne of Glass, but it could be Calm. But she makes a comment or has a thought where she's like, but she had tasted freedom, even if it was just for a brief a brief period of time. And so my best guess would be that she does give Arobynn the gold. And then, well, we know she pays off her debt because that's referenced in TNG too. So the question is like, what happens in that intervening period when she pays off Arobynn and then gets captured, that few months where she's actually free. So hopefully it involves a lot of time with Sam.
We don't have a lot of time.
I know. I hope it involves all the time with Sam then.
I almost wonder if she's going to present that she wants to leave, attempt to pay him off. That pisses Arobynn off, and he does something, and that's how she gets captured. Well, maybe at bare minimum, something involved with that is what leads to Sam's death.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then I'm not entirely sure if Celaena's capture itself is, well, I guess it would have to be connected. I just can't imagine why else he would bother betraying her unless.
I'm telling you, it has to do something with his control over her. I know we previously speculated it could have something to do with a romantic interest, which is, hopefully it's not that. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me if that's kind of how it plays out a little bit. Or he's jealous of Sam, or he just wants to maintain control of her and he wants to punish her for trying to leave. I don't know. So we'll talk about when we get there, but
we'll see.
Yeah, won't be long before we find out.
All right. Well, let's get started with the chapters then. So, chapter 1. We start off with Celaena walking southwest with her nomad guide in the Red Desert to find the assassins.
You know what's funny?
I typed it out and I was like, I'm going to remember how to say this. No, I did not whatsoever.
I knew as soon as I saw that in like the opening few sentences, I'm like, Lorraine's not going to know how to say that. I'm like, I bet she's going to try to skip over it. I knew that. I knew it. It was like the Tori Chesme in last episode.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. They're the silent assassins in the common tongue. So that's what I'm going to use.
How very uncultured of you. It's okay. I called them the silent assassins.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone, don't try to sit here and pretend like you say the says.
The what? What is it?
I don't know. I'm not even going to attempt it because I literally don't know. To move on, Celaena is less than happy with the weather at this point as she sweats all the water out of her body. The desert seems to be even worse than Skulls Bay was, as she notes. It invaded every pore of her, made her head throb and her bones ache. We get a brief timeline update. So at this point, it's been 2 months since her mission in Skulls Bay with Sam, and in total, it's been about 4-ish months since when we first started the Assassin's Blade, give or take a week or two. We had sped forward 2 months in the first short story, and then about a month in Skulls Bay. And then between traveling back, being punished, and Celaena arriving in the desert, it's been about another month. So that's how we landed at about 4 months total. Celaena reflects on how Arobynn had sent her to train with the Silent Assassins for a month to learn obedience and discipline as punishment for their ruse in freeing the slaves in Skulls Bay. We already knew that she had been beaten severely by Arobynn, but even a month later, she still has these bruises and maybe not so much cuts, but definitely the bruises. The guide and Celaena continue walking a bit more through the singing sands of the desert, but then the guide stops, points to the horizon, and says 2 miles that way, indicating that he was not going to finish the rest of the journey with her. Apparently, the guides fear the silent assassins, and though this one had taken her this far, he still regarded them as, quote, little less than shadows of death and would go no further. Before disappearing, the guide tells her they will find you. And then Celaena is left to finish the journey alone before she runs out of water or gets caught at prime roasting hour. Several hours later, Celaena does make it to the oasis that hides the lush green trees and adobe fortress that was the silent assassin's home. Celaena is escorted through the halls of the red sandstone fortress, taking note of all the sentries, exits, and windows as they walk. I thought it was interesting that as she's journeying through the hallways, Celaena notices open-air training rooms where, quote, people from all kingdoms and all ages were sparring and exercising. I felt like this just kind of shows the silent assassins are highly regarded, and it really must be an exceptional place for people to train.
Yeah, I feel like it also highlights the difference between them and Rifthold. They accept everyone from all walks of life, and we'll talk a lot about that as we continue through the story. There's a lot of differences between Celaena's Assassin's Guild and this one. And
yeah,
I gotta be honest, if I had to pick one, I would pick the Silent Assassins. Although I do hate being hot. So that would be like a real issue for me in the desert. But
yeah.
I would find a way to struggle through it.
I don't know. I also hate being cold too, though. So
yeah, I also hate snakes. You know what? I'm going to rescind. I would choose to be literally anything else. Anything else.
How about not an assassin?
Yeah, that sounds good. That's about right.
So eventually they make it to a set of doors leading to a giant chamber where atop a dais, a white-robed man sits. We learn this is the mute master assassin, master of the silent assassins. The escort stops them a safe distance from the dais, and they both bow to the master. As Celaena bows, we learn that Celaena had been given direct orders from Arobynn on what to say, and, quote, there would be no disguises, no masks, no fake names, since she only had 1 month to get a letter of approval from the Mute Master, which had to be written on behalf of her name, Celaena Sardathian. Celaena does just that and kneels down while thanking him and introduces herself as Celaena Sardathian, protege of Arobynn Hamel. She continues stating, my master sent me here to beseech you to train me. I am yours, and then turns her hands upward in a gesture of supplication. The master approaches Celaena, and realizing it was a test of trust, she wills herself into stillness. The master tilts her chin up and silently examines her, his eyes narrowed, his lips forming a tight line as he looked at the remnants of the bruises on the other side of her face. First off, a little bit of eye color theory. The master has sea green eyes, although now I'm starting to think that maybe the eye colors aren't as significant as we believe them to be.
Yeah, when I read that his eyes and Elias's eyes were green, I was like, oh, they're not evil at all. In fact, they seem to be pretty good. I'm like, this really debunks our theory. But
Yeah.
I'm going to pretend that they're standalone and they don't count in our eye color theory. Because I like our theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is before the King of Ireland got involved. Well, not really, not in the timeline, but you know what I mean. Before we got involved with the King of Ireland.
Right.
So it doesn't count.
So we'll see. And then, as we learn more about the master, his examination of her was likely out of concern because we learn the silent assassins have a much different philosophy of training and leadership than Arobynn Hamel. Something that I, too, approve of.
Yeah, I really like that little line. It seems like a throwaway where it says like his lips press into a thin line as he examines her face. And I think when you first read this story, you're like, oh, he disapproves because she's, damaged, or it looks like she got her ass kicked, which she did, right? And as we progress through the story, you realize it's because I think that the Mute Master knows and realizes that Arobynn was the one who beat her because he knows that she's too good to take a beating like that. Like, I'm not saying Celaena won't take a hit or two, but to be totally, absolutely beaten, the only way that could happen to her is if she let it happen. And the only person who she would let do that, or quote unquote, let do that, is Arobynn, right? And so I think he very quickly susses out that it was Arobynn who did that to her. And he obviously disapproves of that. And so that immediately, like the Mute Master.
Yeah. So as Celaena waits, she wonders if Arobynn had sent word of her arrival and circumstances, and then she also worries again about Sam, wondering if his injuries had healed as well. Eventually, the master releases her and motions for her to stand up. He gives her a crooked smile and then snaps his fingers, unleashing 4 men to charge at her, which I think that's kind of a funny contrast from him being concerned about how she is and then just being like, well, too bad. You still gotta get tested. I don't know.
I mean, I guess I'm hypothetically fine with it. He just wants to see what she's capable of. And I'm like, okay, she's going to get tested. But it seemed like they were going for killing blows. Would they have actually killed her? Like, or were they in orders to stop at the very last second? I don't know. That did kind of feel weird to me. I'm like, ooh. Because like they did it without weapons. Like, okay, that would be fine. But there's the vivid description. He tried to like slice into her head with a blade. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa.
And I don't remember if she had any weapons at this point.
No, because they took it at the gate. She had nothing.
Right. Yeah. So she's like hand to hand fighting against someone who has a weapon.
4 someone's who have a weapons. But she got it.
I know.
She got it.
No worries. So that ends chapter 1, and now we're moving on to chapter 2. Celaena quickly takes down the first 2 men who were weaponless, and as she leaps away, she realizes this was another test, a test to see at what level she might begin her training and if she was worthy. I like that her immediate thought after it was, of course she was worthy. She was Celaena Sardathian. Gods be damned. Leave it to our
Gods be
girl to
damned.
be arrogant as ever.
I know.
So then after that, the third man whips out 2 daggers and slices at her. Celaena back arches out of the way. And I'll admit that I pictured this as like a slow motion Matrix
Yeah.
scene.
Oh, totally. Yes.
Yeah. Well, like
Yeah, and she like kind of like does a little Baron motion. Like
Yeah.
when you're viewing it, time slows down.
Yeah,
And then as soon as she clears it, she pops back up and she's like, and you're like, whoa. Yes. That is the same visual I had. Yes.
Great. Excellent. I love that. But then she ducks down and trips the man. And then the fourth man attacks from behind. And Celaena again dodges and then engages in a couple defensive swordplay moves before she makes a hard hit to the man's nose and gut. Once defeating all the men, the Mute Master finally smiles at a parched Celaena, and the rest of the people who had been standing in the shadows step out to reveal themselves. Celaena notes that there are men and women, all tan, though their hair showed the range of various kingdoms on the continent. I just find that to be a little bit of an interesting line because it shows how diverse the assassin's training here is. And I was going to try to read into that more, but I guess maybe the hair color is just kind of reflective of different cultures, I guess, and
Different
everything. So,
yeah, provinces of Aurelia.
yeah. So then, as she scans the people, Celaena takes note of a young woman who flashes her a conspirator's grin. She is a stunning woman with wine red hair, red brown eyes, the most ornate and artful suit of armor Celaena had ever seen. The right shoulder of the armor was fashioned into a snarling wolf's head, and her helmet, tucked into the crook of her arm, featured a wolf hunched over the nose guard. Another wolf's head had been molded into the pommel of her broadsword. Now, the armor definitely seems important for a few reasons. First, we know this girl turns out to be the betrayer friend Celaena had made references to in TOG. And I feel like the wolf could be a little bit of foreshadowing for what she does later.
Oh, totally. It's the same thing with Archer. Remember in Calm at the masquerade, he wears a wolf's mask. Maybe that's unintentional and it was like a subconscious thing by Sarah J. Maas, but I was like, wolves twice in a row for betrayers?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did look up a couple things that wolves sometimes symbolize just in case that was more the route we were going with it. So wolves in general are symbolic of a few things. More notably, they represent teachers of new ideas and wisdom and also represent agents of transformation. I would say that that aligns well.
Yeah.
The cause of what the woman does. Well, obviously it's Ansel. I was waiting to say that until it's revealed, but whatever. We know it's Ansel. So
we know it's Ansel, yeah.
I don't agree with her actual actions in attempting to enact change. Obviously, it's more fitting of what you would qualify as revenge. Well, but she does have a vision for something different, I guess, too.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think in a way, though, the wolf, it's like for both Ansel and Celaena, right? These events lead Celaena to a transformative place. And also, I think the events that, of course, Ansel caused lead her to a transformative place. And I think the Mute Master foreshadows that at the end, where he says she won't long forget that you spared her life and gave her father's sword back. And I said this in the last episode, The Assassin, the Healer. I would bet money that we see Ansel again in this
I think
series.
so too. Yeah, because she lived and she, was
the Witch
spared.
Kingdom.
Yeah,
and
the
I'm
Witch
just gonna
Kingdom.
I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. I think it was like the first episode of Throne of Glass. You were like, I think we're gonna go to the Witch Kingdom. I think Celaena might be a witch, which that part was wrong. I don't think she's a witch, but you were like, I'm pretty sure the Witch Kingdom's gonna be important. So I think this story bolsters that theory.
We back to the Witch Kingdom. Well, we never went there yet, but to the Witch Kingdom.
Mentally, we're back in the Witch Kingdom.
Yes. So then the master beckons the girl forward, and this is when she officially introduces herself as Ansel, whom Celaena will be sharing a room with as well. The master signs to Ansel, who interprets and asks how long Celaena will be there for. Celaena answers 1 month if you allow me to stay that long. The master signs back and Ansel again interprets to say, you'll start training tomorrow at dawn. Celaena is very relieved to know that she can stay since Arobynn had made it seem like convincing the master to train her would be nearly impossible. Ansel then leads her away to go take a much-needed bath. Celaena and Ansel walk through the halls toward the bathing room. Celaena is, of course, a bit on edge and suspicious of Ansel, who she'd been rooming with for a whole month. She notes that she'd never really spent time with other girls since Celaena was the only female assassin, and the only other ladies that were invited to the Assassin's Keep were typically courtesans. This is back in Rifthold. Again, after reading the bonus chapter, The Assassin and the Princess, and now this, I'm just getting a weirder and weirder vibe from Arobynn. Why Celaena and what's been his plan in training Celaena? The fact that she's the only girl to have been in that entire Assassin's Keep. I don't know. Just really bad vibes.
It is odd. Again, I am desperate for the story of how, well, really Celaena's experience when her parents died and then how Arobynn found her and how she ended up at the Assassin's Keep. I would really, really like that story now. And I'm going to be so frustrated if we don't get it in Tab, because I feel like that is really important insight into Celaena and Arobynn's relationship. Yeah. And both their characters, really. So I'm just like,
I agree. I'm just tapping my fingers together. Yeah, waiting.
Biding my time. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, Ansel says to her, I thought you'd be more dramatic. Then Ansel starts pointing out the young children who were acolytes and their responsibilities. After some questioning from Celaena, we learn more about Ansel. Ansel had come to train when she was 13, and she's currently 18. Despite being here for 5 years, she's still never been trained personally by the master. And of course, Celaena finds this very odd. Ansel is from the Flatlands, which is an area along the coast of the Western Wastes, formerly known as the Witch Kingdom. Celaena also finds this odd since she's never heard of the Flatlands, but Ansel continues. She goes on to tell Celaena that Ansel's father was Lord of Briarcliff and had sent her to the Silent Assassins for training so she might make herself useful. We, of course, know that Ansel likes to engage in half-truths, having read the full story, but Celaena doesn't know this at this time. Celaena then asks if she's hot in her armor, and Ansel says, of course, but how else am I to distinguish myself? Ansel tells Celaena her armor was a gift from her father when she left, but the lie detector test determines that was a lie. Also, they never address this, but I do wonder why Ansel never takes off this heavy armor. She does like a couple times, but she primarily seems to keep it on all the time. And I'm like, why?
Well, because it makes her look a badass. How is she to distinguish herself?
Yeah, but isn't it just like heavy and you think it would slow you down, if anything?
I know, you would think, but...
Or maybe she's just constantly suspicious because she knows she's doing something suspicious and she thinks other people are going to find out about her and like kill her.
Very possible.
Eventually, they enter an open walkway, and Ansel asks her a couple questions, including how many people she's killed, how she got her bruises, and whether it was her master that had caused them. It's clear that Ansel has a certain swagger that honestly rivals Celaena, and she makes comments like, I'd want everyone to know that I'd done it, and Celaena notes something about the way Ansel said it seemed different from her own reasoning. Honestly, this was probably one of the very first clues as readers that there's something going on with Ansel.
Yeah.
Celaena constantly notes things that she finds odd about Ansel from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. See, but what I like about this story, it's like a double twist, right? Because when Ansel reveals the true story about what happened to her father and her sister, and you're like, oh, she wants revenge. That's what makes sense. You're like, okay. And then the double twist at the end where you're like, oh, shit, you know? So this story is really nicely constructed from the perspective of a reader. But also, when you read it and you like see the foreshadowing, you're like, oh, I thought it was this, but it was actually this, which makes it more exciting.
Yeah, definitely takes a couple reads to really
pick
up on everything. So they eventually walk down a spiral staircase into a courtyard, and Celaena takes note of a book that had been left open on one of the tables, noting the title was in a scrawling, strange script that she didn't recognize. I was curious as to what this language might be. I was assuming it was just another language. I was just noting it in case.
Yeah. Thought it was surprising that she didn't even recognize it. Not knowing it is one thing, but not recognizing it is another. I mean, I don't think I'm like the smartest person in the world. You know, I've traveled a little bit. I feel like if you put most languages in front of me, at least in my mind, and I say that there's so many languages in the world, but I feel like a fair amount of them I would at least be able to identify and or be familiar with. I'm sure there is a language out there that I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I'm not talking about ancient languages, I'm talking about ones that are actively used in today's society. So that's, when you think about it, it's kind of like a language you've literally never even seen before. It's kind of crazy.
Right. I did have a brief thought where I was like, was it word marks? But then
girl, get out of here with that. Get out of here with that.
Hey, you never know. We don't know what they know. They reach the bathing room and Ansel informs her that her stuff will be brought to the room, which of course makes Celaena uneasy, not only because people may touch her weapons, but also because apparently our girl has packed the most exquisite underwear for her training trip.
In the desert. Okay, I'm like, what is wrong with you? I cannot imagine anything worse than wearing silk underwear in the desert.
Maybe it's silky and it.
What?
I don't know. I feel nice.
Tell us, Lorraine. Tell us your experience with silky underwear.
But yeah, anyways, she likes to be fancy, as we know. So Celaena opts not to give any attitude and simply says thank you. And Ansel leaves. Celaena then spends a very long while in a luxurious simming bathhouse. And while she does, she reflects on how she wanted to go back to Rifthold if only to check on Sam. But at least here at the edge of the world that night seemed very far away. When Celaena arrives at her room, Ansel is not there, though all her belongings had been unpacked. She notes how empty the room was and how she wouldn't have realized she was sharing with anyone if not for the small wolf figurine and human-sized dummy. Celaena also takes a quick peek through Ansel's drawers. She's a super snooper, noting her undergarments were plain and folded and, quote, who folds their undergarments?
Who folds their undergarments? That cracked me up.
And I totally agree, though.
Yes,
I was like, I mean, the same. I don't fold my underwear. I just shove it all in like a little cubby thing, and that's good to go.
I like how she goes on to say, I bet Sam folds his underwear.
Yes.
And I'm like, you know what? I bet he fucking does. I bet Kale folds his underwear too.
Probably.
Not honestly, Dorian, though.
That's crazy behavior. Who's out here folding their underwear? Like, why?
No, not me. No, I have a basket. I have a nice little basket. Toss them in there.
If you fold your underwear, to those of you out there listening, just know that's wild.
But we still love and support you because we're very accepting on this podcast. But it is a little weird to us.
That's the level of organized I can live without.
Maybe we should try it and see if we like it.
No, who has time for that?
No, not me.
Not me. Absolutely not. I don't even fold my laundry anyway at this point. I just leave it like a spare room.
Yeah, works for me. Pretty much same. I have a couch in my bedroom, which is nice, but then I'm like, it's just where the clean laundry is. So,
yep. Yeah.
See, we're funny and relatable on this podcast. Hooray!
This is airing all of my bad habits. But anyways, this is where we then get a memory from Celaena about the day they got back from Skull's Bay to face Arobynn. Celaena notes Arobynn didn't yell or curse. He just went still as his eyes glittered with deadly calm. Arobynn asked her to know how much money you cost me. Sam had tried to step in and defend her, yelling, it's not her fault, but Arobynn shuts him down, stating the only way you became involved in this was because she decided to do it. Arobynn then calls in 3 more men. 2 of them are ordered to hold Sam, and Arobynn says to Celaena, you are not going to enjoy this. You will not forget this, and I don't want you to before he swings his first punch. Sam screams, but is helpless to do anything as Arobynn hits her several more times with blows meant to inflict as much pain as possible without doing permanent damage, before she blacks out. Fuck Arobynn Hamill. This bitch better die. I hate this man.
Yeah, I don't know how we can have a redemption arc for him. Yeah, that's like
absolutely not possible.
No. But I did think it was kind of weird / interesting that the whole time Celaena's internal thought is, no, don't hit Sam. She'll retaliate. And it isn't until a split second before Arobynn starts hitting her that she realizes that he's going to hit her, not Sam.
Right.
I'm like, you didn't see that coming? Because the whole time she's like, they can't do this to Sam. Yeah, they shouldn't be doing this to Sam. And I guess in a way you kind of think the same thing because when they're holding back Sam, they're like, oh, they're going to hold him still while Arobynn kicks his ass. And instead he's like, to Celaena. And you're like,
I didn't think he was ever going to hit Sam. I was like, he's going going straight for Celaena.
Oh, see,
I thought
I don't
maybe he
know.
would after, but I was like, oh, he's definitely going to hit Celaena
Yeah.
first.
Which also, as I'm thinking about it, it's kind of interesting that we don't know what Sam's punishment ultimately was, but obviously a part of the punishment is watching Celaena be beaten. And that tells me that Arobynn knows something about Sam's feelings for Celaena that Celaena doesn't know.
Yeah.
That Arobynn has been able to sense. Because, I mean, obviously we know that they had a relationship from TOG, but
Yes.
even in The Assassin, the Pirate Lord, you get this sense that Sam has a thing for her. And so I think that's interesting when you put it in that context that Arobynn is using Celaena to punish him. And you're like, Arobynn knows something.
He knows there's like a psychological component to it. It's beyond just like physically hurting them. He knows that for both of them to be in that situation, watching the other person be beaten severely and not being able to do anything about it is going to be, in some ways, probably just as painful as the physical beatings themselves. So very fucking cruel and horrific of Arobynn. But that ends chapter 2. And now we're moving on to chapter 3. Later that evening, Celaena wakes up from her nap and dresses in her finest tunic, which brings out her turquoise eyes, her fey turquoise eyes. Ansel arrives and walks her to the dining hall for dinner. And when they arrive, Celaena instinctively takes note of the exits in the packed hall as Ansel slides into a seat at a table. Ansel introduces her to the other assassins. Celaena carefully scans the others around her and, of course, surveys the platter of delicious food in front of them. Ansel starts helping herself to food on a plate and tells her to just start eating, assuring Celaena that the food is not poisoned before eating some lamb herself. Ansel then states Lord Beric might want to kill us, but he knows better than to try to get rid of us through poisons. Of course, everyone's like, who's Lord Beric? Celaena asks this very question, and we learn that he is the ruler of Xandria and claims he owns part of the desert as well. Apparently, the king of Otterlin had sent an embargo on the Red Desert after Lord Beric failed to send troops into Eelway to fight against the rebellion. And Beric has been dying to get back in the king's good graces ever since. He somehow got it into his thick skull that killing all of us and sending the head of the Mute Master to Otterlin on a silver platter would do the trick. I am curious to see why he didn't send troops in, referring to Lord Beric. I want to know what his reasoning was for that. But Ansel continues to share that every so often Lord Beric makes unsuccessful attacks against the silent assassins in an effort to get to the Mute Master. And of course, we also know that this is part of how Ansel and Lord Beric are able to make an agreement with each other. Ansel obviously has the in with the silent assassins. Lord Beric wants to get to the Master, so
it just sets us up for all the events that transpire, which is interesting to me that the Mute Master, knowing Ansel's history, makes her the courier. I don't think he really predicted that she would align with Lord Beric, but why would you put her in the position to do that? I don't know. It seems like poor foresight on the Mute Master's.
Also, after 5 years and she still never comes clean to you about anything, like, you wouldn't find that a little bit weird. I understand having compassion. The Mute Master is a very compassionate man, but 5 years is a long time to wait it out to see if somebody's gonna
yeah, but I
like be honest.
That's what makes him such a good master, right? That he really is like, let them choose their own fate and their own path. And I think he knows that Ansel hasn't decided because, for your point, it's taken 5 years and she still can't decide what she wants to do. And so I think he's trying to let her work through it.
I guess so.
I see you're a woman of action.
Well, I'm just like, you gave her the benefit of the doubt for a little too long. And then she, sure enough, ended up
on you. Yeah.
So I was like, I understand giving some grace for, a couple years, but then by that point, it's probably best to figure out what's really going on, Anyways, just my personal opinion. Mikhail, who we learn is Ansel's lover, chuckles and says nothing's worked yet. And Ansel shares that despite his failed attempts, Lord Beric is almost brutal enough to make up for it. This is when we learn that Ansel basically serves as the ambassador for the silent assassins and is sent to Xandria to meet with Barrick to negotiate some sort of accord. Though, obviously, as we just talked about, Ansel is a spy. Ansel also says, thankfully, he still won't dare violate the terms of parley. But one of these days, I'll pay for my courier duties with my hide. I'm sure you will, Ansel. I'm sure you will.
Well,
Maybe.
maybe. We'll see. Her fate remains to be seen.
She better make up for it in a big way.
I think she will.
Boost. Celaena then finally decides it's safe to eat and takes a bite of meat. While the others talk, Celaena looks around and notices that there was an air of peace and contentment, of joy even, amongst everyone there. Celaena then looks over at some foreign dignitaries, whispering with each other. Ansel informs Celaena that they are discussing which assassins they want to bid for. Ansel goes on to elaborate that the dignitaries scout for assassins and offer them positions to work for them either for one mission or for a lifelong contract. Any of them are free to go if they wish. Ansel and Mikhail share they wouldn't leave, with Ansel stating her father would wallop her, and Mikhail stating he actually liked the silent assassins. Celaena asks where the dignitaries hail from, and Mikhail says, "None in Ardolin's grip. Our master knows well enough that everything from Eoway to Terrasen is your master's territory." They continue eating, and Celaena feels someone looking at her. She looks over to see a dark-haired, handsome man with sea green eyes looking at her. The man smiles at Celaena, and she notes that he was certainly desirable as Sam, maybe. But she still thinks of Sam over this man. Ansel informs her that this is Ilias, the master's son. She then jokes that he usually doesn't pay girls any attention, but maybe he has a thing for blondes. They joke around some more with Celaena, noting she wasn't here for anything like that, and eventually Mikhail brings up her bruises and asks if she deserved it. Celaena just says it depends on who's telling the story, but if the 200 slaves that I free are telling the story, then no. I suppose I didn't deserve it. This pretty much stuns everyone into silence.
Yeah, what a brilliant retort. When she delivered that line, I was like, damn. Because immediately everyone's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, what did you do?
There was actual true silence. Even the silent assassins were like stunned into silence.
Right. So the next day, Celaena starts her first day of training. Ansel informs her first exercise will be to run 3 miles across the desert to the oasis with 2 buckets. Celaena, of course, is surprised and offended she wasn't working with the master immediately, but Ansel says she's got to start smelling like the red desert first. Ansel goes on to say, you won't find him, not until you prove yourself. Show that you're willing to leave behind all that you know and all that you were. Celaena attempts to complain again about how she needs his letter of approval, but of course, this is futile. Doesn't work. Ansel says, if I were you, I'd suggest trading with me until he decides that you're worth it. Make it seem more like you care about us and less like you're here just for that letter of approval. Not that we all don't have our own secret agenda. She, of course, winks.
Yes. That line, it hits so different once you've actually finished the story. She even winks. I feel like the first time you're reading that, Ansel is just kind of, this seems like something she'd say. She's a very teasing, lighthearted, just happy-go-lucky sort of character. And so you think she's just like, oh, don't we all, wink, wink. And then, of course, when you actually read the story, you're like, oh, shit, she for real did have a secret agenda.
And she's been dropping all these hints from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, I know. Seriously.
It's pretty bold of her, honestly.
Yeah, well, she's a pretty bold woman.
That's true. Celaena decides she'd tag along with Ansel for now and then grumbles some more about the running. Ansel tells her if you can run 3 miles across the dunes of the Red Desert, then 3 miles back, you can do almost anything, and then takes off. Celaena follows the tracks of the people before her and makes it 1 mile before she had to slow down to a walk. She struggles through the journey, as would I, but continues, even as some assassins pass her, already on their way back. She eventually does make it to the oasis, where she strides straight into the water. Several hours later, Celaena is eating dinner, having got back right at dusk. Ansel consoles her and then tells her a story of her first run and how she'd collapsed and had to be carried by Ilias. The quote was, if I hadn't been about to die, I would have been swooning.
I would really like to see Ilias because he sounds very
Yeah.
handsome.
I need somebody to make some fan art of this man.
Yes, please. Yes, the sea
Yeah.
green eyes.
Mhm.
The way he's described, you're like, oh,
The classic dark hair, light eyes combination.
6'5",
Yeah.
finance.
Yeah. Yep. Just my type. Okay. Celaena blushes as Elise gives a looky look over again, but she turns her attention to where the master was sitting with some acolytes as she waits for him to stand. Eventually, the master gets up and Celaena follows him out. She catches up to him in the hallway, and before she begins to sign, she notes that there was a pale line around one of his fingers, perhaps where a wedding ring had once been. She then starts to make her best attempt at sign language to communicate, I came here to train with you, not with the others. And of course, we learn later that this was actually the master's seal ring, which Ansel had swiped from him for her plan. The master nods in understanding, and Celaena again motions to emphasize she really needs some one-on-one time with him. But this time, the master shakes his head, making it clear she's going to have to get in line and wait. Celaena, of course, becomes more frustrated because how dare anyone make Otterland's greatest assassin wait? But Ilias intercepts her before she goes Karen mode and chases after the master who had walked off. Celaena reiterates to Ilias she wasn't going to hurt the master, and Ilias releases the arm he grabbed to stop her, and then he extends a hand in greeting. They exchange formalities, and Celaena realizes that Ilias was the Celaena Sardathian of the Mute Assassins. Rifthold might be her realm, but this was his. She goes on to feel a bit envious of Ilias, who seemed to garner respect, admiration, and feels utterly at home in the desert. I like Ilias. We don't get much from him, but he seems nice.
Yeah, he does. I mean, it's kind of silly because you really get so little page time with him, but you can tell he just has a kind heart. You know, he just seems like a really good person.
I think so too. Yeah. So they part ways, and later that night, Ansel assures her the run the next day will be better. Celaena briefly asks Ansel about her relationship with Mikhail. Ansel and Mikhail have been dating since she was 15, which Ansel explains off by stating girls in the Flatlands are married as early as 14. Celaena is shocked by this and literally can't imagine being anyone's wife at 14 and simply says, oh, and honestly, girls, same.
Yeah. You read that and you're like, ooh, and then you remember that Mikhail in his 20s.
Like 20, yeah.
So he would have been like 22, 23 when they started their relationship, which is really creepy. Really creepy and inappropriate. That is the one detail that I'm like, why is the Mute Master allowing this behavior? That, and in conjunction, which we'll talk about when we get to their fight, but how after Ansel and Mikhail hook up, they all tease her and they congratulate him. And that seems like some really bro behavior. And I'm surprised that the Mute Master allows that. I feel like that kind of behavior, it doesn't seem like it would normally be tolerated. So it's just kind of a weird juxtaposition, but
I agree. Very odd. After that, Ansel falls asleep shortly after, and Celaena once again thinks about Sam. Even weeks later, she had no idea how she somehow gotten attached to him, what he'd been shouting when Arobynn beat her, and why Arobynn had thought he'd need 3 seasoned assassins to restrain him that day. Fucking Arobynn. Anyways, that ends chapter 3. On to chapter 4. The next day, Celaena does indeed have a better run. She continues her running and training for the next couple of days. Celaena notes that the atmosphere of the training amongst the silent assassins was much less vicious than the cutthroat environment Arobynn had created amongst his assassins. There's a quote where she says, he made her see everyone but Arobynn and Ben as a potential enemy, as allies, yes, but also as foes to be closely watched. Weakness was never to be shown at any cost. Brutality was rewarded, and education and culture were equally important. Words could be just as deadly as steel. We keep pointing this out about Arobynn, but it does sound a little bit groomy.
Yes.
Like making Celaena feel like the only person she should trust and depend on is like old ass abusive Arobynn.
Yes. I felt the same thing when I read that line. It really gave me the ick. I'm like, it's one thing, like the element of training her to never underestimate anyone and anyone could be your enemy. Don't trust anyone because, I mean, in their line of work, that seems accurate, right? But the whole everyone's an enemy, but you can trust me.
Me?
Yeah, don't worry, trust me. Like it's a little.
I hate
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
She compares her home environment to the silent assassins who, despite being killers as well, still looked out for one another and embraced collective wisdom. While they were all competitors, it appeared that an invisible link bound them together. Despite the help the silent assassins to offer her in their training, Celaena is still frustrated with not being able to work with the master yet and resolves that she'd get that letter, even if she had to hold a dagger to his throat while he wrote it. Okay, Celaena, let's
I
not.
know. I was like, girl, calm down.
I know, you gotta chill out. A couple more days proceed uneventfully, but on her fifth night, they get a little visit from the local villain himself, Lord Beric. Celaena finds herself atop the fortress walls and overhears another woman state it was too convenient to be coincidental that he would attack on the same night that many of the assassins were not there as they escorted dignitaries to the nearest port. Of course, this again is foreshadowing for Ansel's betrayal later, because how else would he have known? Ansel tells Celaena to get her arrow ready and, on the signal, aim and fire for the sand just below the soldiers. Celaena asks, "We're not going to kill them?" And Ansel informs her that they just want to scare them off, not start an all-out battle.
Which it's weird because when you think about Ansel's comment earlier about any of the assassins that Lord Beric gets his hands on, he sends them back in pieces. That kind of feels like a declaration of war. Lord Beric is totally fine with killing them, but they're not going to kill them.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I get where they're coming from, but I was kind of like, if they continue to attack you unprompted, I feel like retaliation is okay. Yeah.
I don't know. Weird stuff going on. But soon they get the signal, and all the assassins, including Celaena, launch their arrows as planned, creating a massive wall of fire between Beric's soldiers and the fortress. Beric's men attempt to continue firing arrows back, but they are unsuccessful, and the skirmish is over pretty quickly. Later around dawn, Mikhail comes to the rooms to inform Ansel she is going to Xandria on the Mute Master's orders. Ansel invites Celaena to join her, stating it's a 2-day ride, and coming with me might help get him to consider training you. Celaena considers this, then asks, "What will we be doing in Xandria?" And Ansel mischievously says, "That's for you to find out." Although, obviously, we know Ansel has her own agenda. I was curious as to whether she did truly. Well, I guess it was both, because as we learn, I think Ansel did really consider Celaena to be a friend, and that's why she's on her way to help her and everything. So I suppose it's two things at once. She does want to help Celaena, but she also is still running her own game plan right now. That was a very short chapter, so that rounds out chapter 4. And now we're moving on to chapter 5. After traveling all day, Celaena and Ansel have stopped for the night to sleep. Ansel gives Celaena some crap over her fussiness with the sand, asking her, "Are you sure you're Celaena Sardathian?" Which I thought was funny.
Yes, I love that quote.
Celaena makes a small jab back, stating, "I suppose that someone from the Western Wastes would find this luxurious." And this turns into Ansel providing a mini history lesson of the Western Wastes. She tells Celaena about the former rulership of the Witch Kingdom. The Kraken Queens were the rulers for 500 years and were gifted with ethereal beauty. The Iron Teeth Witches were unfortunately ugly, with iron teeth and fingernails.
Unfortunately, they were ugly. That's the most important thing about them. They're ugly. Okay.
Yes.
Sign me up to be a Kraken witch. Okay. I don't want to be ugly.
UGLY.
You ain't got
no alibi. You ugly.
You ugly.
I was like that elementary school anthem.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I guarantee every single listener just started singing along with us. Everybody knows that. That was like the ultimate insult, you know?
Yeah. Nothing better.
Sick burn.
So, but anyways, it was these hags, referring to the Iron Teeth Witches, that had overthrown the Beauty Queens. Unfortunately for the Iron Teeth Witches, the last Kraken Queen cast a spell that turned the land against anyone that flew under the Iron Teeth banner, rendering the land useless and dead. Though eventually the land became fertile again once the Iron Teeth Witches migrated east. Now, this is information that we had gotten previously from Baba Yellowlegs when she converses with Dorian and Celaena on separate occasions in Crown of Midnight. So this was another mini recap of that information. Celaena is shocked to hear this and asks if Ansel had seen a witch before, and She sure has. Ansel goes on to tell a story from her childhood. When she was 8, her sister, her, and her sister's friend all went to go check out a watchtower that supposedly had an arch that served as a portal through which you could see another world when you look through it on the night of the summer solstice. Ansel herself didn't go all the way because she got scared, but her sister and the friend, Maddie, continued on. Unfortunately, she heard screaming. Her sister comes running back without Maddie, and it's her sister who reveals that they had seen an old woman with metal teeth that was standing in the shadows and had grabbed Maddie, presumably eating her as well. At dawn, Ansel's father and his men had raced to try and find Maddie, only to find the bones of a child, white as ivory and picked clean.
Okay, obviously that's creepy as hell, but I have to ask you, do you think the witch that they saw is Baba Yellowlegs?
I don't know. I was wondering about that. The witch? Well, I don't know if
Well,
it's
there's
this
two
one.
different witch interactions.
There's 2 different witches. Yes.
Yeah, the other one feels like Baba. This one, I feel like could have been anyone. I scoured this section multiple times to see if there was any other description of anything, and all it says is the Iron Teeth, and that could be any Iron Teeth witch that exists. So it's easy to be like, oh, it has to be Baba, but we also know that there's other witches out there. Baba's just the only one we know of right now. But in my mind, I'm like, of course it was because, Baba. But I wasn't sure. But I do feel like the other witch is Baba, which we'll talk about when we get there.
Yeah, she has a line that I was like, ooh, that sounds very, very similar to something Baba has said before.
Yeah.
Baba. But
Baba! Oh my God, I've been saying that. Baba!
Baba Yellowlegs. In any case, it seems like witches love to work children. So
they like to work children. They do. It's funny. So Lauren and I did a recording this morning, and for those of you, I think I've said it before, but I call Lorraine Baba, and my children call her Baba. My almost 3-year-old, she came in after we were done recording, and she was like, "Where did Baba go?" And it was the cutest thing I've ever heard. I was like, "Oh, she's at home." She's like, "What is Baba doing at home?" I was like, "I don't know." That was so
chilling.
Cute. Yeah. It makes me so happy when they call you Baba.
Ma. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, we're digressing. We're getting a little silly because this is a nighttime recording for us. So yeah. Anyways,
and we recorded early
digress.
this morning. So just, be gentle.
It's a big day for us. Yeah. But to get back on track, I did find this very interesting. And I do feel like this could become a place that Celaena goes back to in the future. The Western Wastes, obviously, like we said before, have been mentioned several times. And the fact that there's a freaking portal there has to be relevant.
Potentially. It's rumored. But no, you're right. That is something to keep in mind in the future.
For those of you listening, I'm waggling my eyebrows. Celaena is horrified by the story. But Hansel goes on to provide a valuable piece of information that Celaena does use later in Crown of Midnight. Ansel says the only way to kill a witch is to cut off her head. And Celaena does just that to Baba Yellowlegs. But wait, we're not done with information from Ansel. She also goes on to state that if she had her own army of assassins, she'd hunt down all the witches. Also, Ansel feels the Flatlands would prosper if they had an army of assassins to defend them. In fact, if she was master, she'd use their numbers for greatness, for glory, and they'd defend every unprotected realm out there.
Yeah. I feel like that is such heavy foreshadowing and allusion to her story, right? I think that is at the core of Ansel's character, that she feels great survivor's guilt for living while her family did not, and also not intervening. And she's not able to forgive herself because you have to remember she was 12 when her father was brutally murdered in front of her and her sister. Like, what was she going to do? She was 12. But we know survivor's guilt is very common. That is just so evident of her trauma. And that is the way that she manifests it, is that she wants to be able to rectify the wrongs and protect any people that has ever happened to. And when you know her backstory, you're like, damn, that really hits home.
I do think it's interesting, though, that she hates all the witches. I mean, granted, yes, one took Maddie, their friend, but then another one helps her and gives her that gold and everything. So I'm like, it's weird that she still hates the witches that much, even after that encounter.
That's true.
But anyways, the next day, they arrive at Xandria on market day. Ansel informs her she should go shopping while she meets with Lord Barrick, and Celaena is surprised to learn she couldn't go with her, and Celaena has a brief thought about Ansel. She thinks Ansel kept glancing at the palace a few blocks away, nervous that she'd be late, or nervous she was going to confront Barrick on behalf of the master. As we noted, Celaena has been slowly picking up on the odd behavior and words of Ansel, but she hasn't pieced it all together yet at
She's
this
getting
point.
there. Yeah, you can
She's
tell.
getting-
It's like her subconscious is picking up on all these things because they just don't quite sit right. And you're like, what's going on? Yeah.
Right. Ansel states she'll meet her at the fountain at 3 and then vanishes into the crowds. Celaena contemplates following her, thinking what could be so important and secret that Ansel wouldn't allow her to partake in the meeting, but ultimately decides not to. She then goes winding through the different vendors for the next couple of hours, noting how lively the city was and wishing perhaps she'd brought some more money. She also haggles for some beautiful shoes, though she doesn't buy them at this time, which I'm sure was an absolute struggle for her. Suddenly, something glistening in the shadow catches her eye, and Celaena finds a guarded merchant with one of the rarest products to exist in this world, spider silk, which hails from legendary horse-sized Stygian spiders that dwelled in the Rune Mountains. According to some legends, the spiders offered the silk for human flesh, while others claim the spiders dealt in years and dreams and could take either as payment. The merchant is impressed that she recognizes the material and then says, I might also ask what a girl from the north is doing in Xandria. He then asks how she knows about spider silk, and Celaena says, I know a courtesan in Rifthold whose madam had a handkerchief made from it, given to her by an extraordinarily wealthy client. I'm assuming she's referring to Archer. I guess she must be talking about Archer's madam, because Archer's a courtesan.
Yeah, I know
right?
a courtesan in Rifthold who's madam. So she's talking about Archer,
Yeah.
which is Clarice, I think was her name. Had a
Yes.
handkerchief. Yeah. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought she was talking about. Clarice received the gift. Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So then Celaena then asks how the merchant got so much of the precious silk. We learn he went to the Rune Mountains himself, and it does seem pretty obvious that the Rune Mountains are a magical place. Maybe not anymore or currently, but
mystical, mystery. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's
there's a
giving
lot
Oakwold
of
Forest vibes, but like evil,
Mhm.
like not good.
maybe like darker
Yeah.
magic, perhaps, or more of like the shadowy occult things of magic in a way. But anyways,
Mhm.
he also reveals he is 25 years old despite looking 40 because the spider's price has been 20 years for 100 yards of silk. Celaena asks if it's possible for him to get his years of life back, and then the merchant informs her a witch had told him the only way to get his time back was to kill the spider who took his time, and that only a great warrior could slay a Stygian spider. Wink, wink. Will Celaena be slaying a spider in the future?
Yes. Okay. This whole interaction just really screams we need to bookmark it. It's important. This
Mhm.
unknown merchant is important. This spider silk is important. It's even left off. He's like, well, I'll return, in a year or more. And she's like, has there been Hamel for me? If this doesn't come up again, I'm going to be really frustrated because it just screams, remember me for later.
Yeah.
And not just like the Stygian spider part, but like really all of it. So I'm like, what could this possibly be? And who is this merchant guy? I don't know.
I want to know what else the spiders can do because obviously they said they dealt in years and dreams.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean by dreams? What is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean? So, yeah, lots of questions about the spiders and this merchant, but we're just going to bookmark it for now. Back to it if it comes up again. So,
When I was reading this, all I could hear was Ron Weasley going, I don't like spiders. Just like thinking how he would react.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what was the spider in Harry Potter? What was that?
Aragog.
Okay, yeah, that's how I was
Yeah.
imagining these spiders to look.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. Headcanon.
Mm-hmm. He throws off Celaena when he says, though perhaps an assassin from the north might do, but then he goes on to ask, are you here to spy for Lord Varric? Celaena is again surprised by this, but the merchant simply says, I heard from a city guard that strange dealings go on between Beric and some of the silent assassins. Now, by this point, I was definitely fully on alert about Ansel. It's pretty clear about this point that she's the spy. If you had kind of ignored the previous
Yeah.
things, by this point, you were like, oh, like,
yeah. Okay, like something's
sure.
up, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and you may not even think it's Ansel, but you may think something is going to come. Well, because that in conjunction with how did they know that some of the assassins were going to be out escorting the diplomats? And you're like, oh, there's a mole in the keep, right?
Yes.
And so you're thinking like the story could go in that way. So I feel like at this point, it's a little heavy-handed that it's Ansel, but it really could be someone else thus far, right? Especially because, as I said earlier, it's like that double twist. Like when she reveals her true past, you're like, oh, that's the twist, right? But then, it goes further and you're like, oh. So yeah, but no, by this point, you should definitely be on high alert.
Yep. Pay attention. Celaena doesn't quite know what to make of the information, though she tucks it away for later and wonders if this was why Ansel was being so secretive about her meetings with Beric. The merchant asks if she'll get his years back for him, and Celaena cheekily responds, I'm unavailable until the end of the summer, but adds the next time he's in Rifthold, he should find Arobynn Hamel, and he would know how to contact her for him. Celaena begins to walk away, but the merchant stops her and gives her a 6 square inch piece of the precious spider silk, stating it would be a reminder that everything has a price. I don't know what it was about that line, but it also felt similar to me in the same way when Baba had said, nameless is my price. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of directions you could go with that in terms of, everything has a price. And I mean, I wonder too if that is foreshadowing for at the end when the Mute Master gives her all the trunks of gold and even his gift and the gold when she gives it to Arobynn, like it has its price. And I feel like that price is going to manifest in some bad shit for Celaena and possibly Sam. So maybe it's foreshadowing for that.
I do wonder what she's going to do with this piece of fabric later, because it seems like she gets enough gold from the Mute Master that the gold alone could pay off her debts. So I'm curious to see if she still has the spider silk piece later.
So it's funny you say that. I scoured COM and TOG. I searched a couple different 6-inch handkerchiefs, silk, little box, and I couldn't find any reference.
Nothing.
TOG or COM. If you guys know one, please let us know because I would love to see the reference. I'm not saying it's not going to come up again. I wouldn't be surprised if it does actually, but my best guess is that if she does still have it, it's in that apartment she kept that she left in her will to Chaol.
Yeah, I feel like she's not going to bust it out until something really dire comes up. Because I feel like it's also, do you think it's magical? Like the silk itself is magical, or is it just really highly prized as a material?
I thought about that because I'm like, what is she going to do with the 6-inch square? Who cares?
Right.
And the other Madame Clarice gets one as a freaking handkerchief. And so I know she talks about the properties of it. It's very beautiful and it's super strong, stronger than steel and all that. And it's also very rare. And I get that the rarity makes it worth a lot of money. But it's at the end of the day, how much can non-magical fabric really be worth, right? Because she's talking about a king's ransom, all the wealth of a kingdom, right? He traded 20 years of his life for 300 feet. And so it makes me feel like, given the mythical nature of the Stygian spiders, that it has to have some other property. I feel like it has to.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was I just can't imagine why else you would keep
risk it all. Yeah.
Yeah, and keep such a tiny piece of it. But in general, I think that Celaena knows very well what it means to sacrifice and the true life cost of decisions in life with what happened to her family and now she's grown up as an assassin and everything. So I feel like that line from the merchant resonates with her. Later, Celaena does end up getting the beautiful shoes, and she meets with Ansel at the water fountain. Ansel sneaks Celaena within the palace walls toward the legendary Assyrian horses. Celaena is left wordless, and so am I as they describe the beautiful horse. So in the book, it says the horse was black as pitch with dark eyes that bored into Celaena's own. She'd heard of Assyrian horses, of course, the most ancient breed of horse in Aurelia, Legend claimed that the Fae had made them from the four winds: spirit from the north, strength from the south, speed from the east, and wisdom from the west, all rolled into the slender-snouted, high-tailed, lovely creature that stood before her.
Yep. I had the same thing. I'm like, that's not legend. That's fact. And there better be some Asterian stallions in our future. Or mares, Asterian horses.
Yeah. Or I wonder again if they are also magical beings too, in a way.
Well, I don't necessarily know they're magic, but they're mythical in the sense that they're made from the origins of magic, right? I think the magic is at their extreme speed, agility, endurance, etc. But I don't think like the horses themselves have any magical properties. Quit trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
I will always try to make fetch happen.
I know you will.
Anytime I can.
I know.
So Celaena remembers that Asterian pedigrees are traced through the female line, which sounds very familiar to a certain Fae lineage we learn of in Calm.
Good call out. I didn't think about that.
And then Ansel introduces her to two mares, Hisley and Casita. Casita is a slender mare with dapple gray and a sea foam white mane and thundercloud coat. Her eyes also seemed older than Earth itself. Ancient horses. Ansel shares that Lord Beric planned to either give them away as a bribe or would otherwise lose interest in them, and this is when Ansel asks, "Are you a strong rider?" before jumping atop Hisley's saddle and then says, "You're gonna have to ride like hell," before they go galloping off, leaving Celaena with barely a moment to do the same with Casita.
Okay, I like when you said ride like hell. You said it with a little bit of an accent. You're like, ride like hell.
Ride like hell. Oh my god, I loved that Ansel in the audiobook version.
Yes.
They gave her like a
little southern
accent. Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Okay, because I didn't remember if you did the audiobooks at all for them. I know you usually do like the physical. I do both. Yeah. But at first I was kind of off put by it. By the end of it though, I loved it.
Yeah, I liked it too. It's also funny to me that for some reason, I don't know why this is so funny to me, but even in Crescent City, like the accents for Flynn are like
oh my
Southern.
Gosh. I hate his accent in Crescent City. I'm sorry. I need like 30 seconds to rant about this. I liked it for Ansel, but I fucking hate Flynn's accent. It is horrible. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. I don't feel that a Southern hick accent belongs in the Fae world, and definitely not in freaking Crescent City. It drives me insane. And it's not like a lilt. It's like, hey, y'all. Like, it's so bad. Yeah. It's so bad. I hate it. Elizabeth Evans is a fantastic, fantastic audiobook narrator. I've listened to probably 100+ hours of her narration. And I love or like all of the voices and characters she does except for him. Yeah. That is the only one that I fucking hate. I hate it.
I don't know why. It just, you're right. It just doesn't feel right for the character.
No. And especially because when you think about it.
It's really out of place.
You've got Rune and Declan and Flynn, and they all grew up together. So why would Flynn have to be talking like this while Rune and Declan are just like, hey man, what's up? You know?
Yeah.
They're basically brothers. So like,
I know.
Why would one brother not, I hate it.
I don't know. Yeah.
If you agree with me, please comment, subscribe, rate and review the podcast to show your support. Little shameless plug there. Okay, I tried.
Yeah.
But seriously,
anyways,
I hate it.
Yeah, we digress about accents.
Yeah.
But that ends chapter 5, and now we move on to chapter 6. Halfway, guys. Celaena trails Ansel as they rush past guards, who scramble to start chasing them down. Celaena notes Casita moved like thunder and turned with the swiftness of lightning as they charge into the sands of the Red Desert. Celaena contemplates knocking Ansel off her horse, but Ansel yells out, "Live a little, Sardothian!" And they charge between dunes to reveal the Gulf of Oro off in the distance. Celaena realizes in that moment that this was quite literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and in a state of utter bliss and adrenaline, she looks skyward and laughs.
Lorraine, I think you meant to say, live a little, Sardothian.
Live a little, Sardothian?
Yeah, I think that's what you meant to say.
You're right, I did. Soon, they reach a giant fissure, also known as the desert cleaver, which does nothing to stop Ansel, but does give Celaena some pause. Ansel really gives Celaena a run for her money when she charges straight at the fissure with zero indication she'd be doing anything other than playing Daredevil. Celaena realizes Ansel had planned this all along, but they really didn't have much of a choice. If they went around the wall, they'd be followed, but the odds of taking the guards in regular combat was also not a great option. So, Celaena is forced to follow Ansel toward the ravine as well. Ansel and Hisley leap across first, landing with inches to spare. Celaena does the same with Casita as they, fortunately, make it across as well, leaving Lord Beric's guards literally in the dust. Eventually, they stop, and when Ansel asks, "Wasn't that wonderful?" Celaena just punches her hard in the face as her response.
I love that part.
I know, I thought that was funny.
Honestly, that feels appropriate. I like that Ansel takes it in stride. She's like, yeah, I probably deserve that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They continue riding after a short rest and stop again, this time for the night. As they lay staring up at the sky, the girls begin conversing about the constellations. Celaena points out the various ones to Ansel, which include the dragon, the swan, and the stag, Lord of the North, which Celaena also states gets the fancy title because it remains constant. No matter the season, he's always there. Ansel asks why, and Celaena responds, so the people of Terrasen will always know how to find their way home, so they can look up at the sky no matter where they are and know Terrasen is forever with them.
So that's pretty heavy-handed. Obviously, we know Ansel being calm. There's many, many references to the stag, the Lord of the North, and Celaena's thoughts, memories, in her observations. And so this is clearly just another reference to that. I don't want to glaze over that, but oh my God, I just have to say, please, please, please let the dragon in the sky and the constellations please be foreshadowing that there are going to be dragons in this series. Oh God, please. That's literally, I was like, oh my God, all caps. I'm like, foreshadowing for a dragon. Please, please, please.
There has to be. Like, there's just been so much indication, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's just the wyverns, but wyverns are different than dragons, as we've discussed. But I just, oh God.
Well, no, there's like the dragon carvings and stuff around the library, and they have little things that point to it. How are you going to have a wyvern and not a dragon?
I don't know. Well, how do you have an entire show called House of the Dragon with no dragons and all wyverns? Riddle me that, Lorraine. Riddle me that.
That's a different universe. I'll ignore it.
But either way, please let there be dragons, please.
I know. I hope so. But Ansel suddenly asks, do you ever want to return to Terrasen? You talk about Terrasen the way my father used to talk about our land. Celaena is puzzled and notes how she said used to, but Ansel continues on to reveal one of her lies. Ansel reveals she had lied to the master and that her father and Briarcliff were now gone as of 5 years ago when Lord Locke had invaded their land, seizing everything and killing many, including Ansel's sister and father. Ansel was spared only because she had been hiding in a cupboard, and she was 12 at the time. Once Lord Locke had left, Ansel took her father's sword and escaped into the White Fang Mountains. There, she found an Iron Teeth witch, and rather than kill her, the witch had said, but she told me that it was not my fate to die there, that I should journey south to the Silent Assassins in the Red Desert, and there I would find my fate. She fed me and bound my bleeding feet and gave me gold that I later used to commission my armor, then sent me on my way.
I think you and I are both in agreement here that this has to be Baba, right? And especially, it's the language about the fate, right? It's not your fate. Go and find your fate. And that is the same language that Baba uses with Dorian and Kale and Celaena each time that we interact with her at the carnival in Calm. And that one has to be Baba. I feel like it has to be.
I feel like it is too. And I think we know Baba had been wandering around in the White Fang Mountains, right?
Yeah.
I think she had said that
for a while. Yeah. I feel like Baba always displayed this deep-seated sense of fate and what that means. And because remember, she's very chastising to them. She's like, are you ready to face your fate? Like, ignore it for as long as you can, but you can't outrun your fate. So it really seems like Baba gives this really strong weight to people's fate and what it means. And it's not for us, and by us, I mean like the collective we in the universe, to interfere in people's fates. And even Baba's not about that. The word governs all.
And I guess that explains why Baba didn't kill her, which is also weird though, because then Baba did try to kill Celaena.
Yeah. That's true.
Seems a little
Well,
contradictory
but
on her part.
I think we debated this at the time. Like, would Baba have killed Celaena? Because Celaena outright threatens her.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
would Baba have killed her? Or was it because she could read Celena's intentions and knew Celaena had no intention of leaving that caravan without killing Baba? So I feel like that leaves it a little bit more open.
That's
Because
true.
I can't say with confidence that she would have willfully killed Celaena without provocation. I can't say that she would have.
Yeah.
And I need to go back and read that chapter again.
So then, to continue on, Ansel had been training with the silent assassin ever since, waiting for the day she would march into Locke's Hall to exact her revenge to repay him for what he did to her family. Celaena finds herself crying because she too deeply understands what that sort of loss was like. Celaena then grabs Ansel's hand and says, "We'll make them pay for it in the end. We'll see to it that they pay." And Ansel responds, "Yes, we will." We already know that there's been several pieces of foreshadowing for what Ansel will do in this chapter, but again, like Irene from the Healer story, I do feel like we're going to see Ansel again. We already talked about this. Perhaps she'll come back and fight alongside Celaena when she's fully prepared to combat the King of Otterlin. So,
Yeah.
I don't agree with what Ansel does, but I can understand why she did what she did.
Yeah.
Again, like we've talked about as well, I can't imagine the pain and anger that you'd feel from such a horrible event occurring in your life. And I also think that this is exactly why Celaena had spared her in the end as well. Because Celaena had experienced the same thing under the power-hungry conquest of the King of Otterlin. She just learned to work through it. Like the mute master had said, she learned to endure her pain to an extent. Kind of.
I was going to say, it was like Thorn of Glass and Calm is riddled with her not dealing with her trauma. So, sort of.
I will say, though, despite what Celaena has gone through, she doesn't tend to kill innocent. Remember, she has like a weird kind of like moral code. Even with the people that she kills, she tends to only really kill people that seemingly deserve it. And then, when she becomes the king's champion, she doesn't actually kill any of them. And like throughout her past and everything, as we've seen in these short stories, she does do things that are pretty compassionate. And she doesn't seem to turn on people who don't deserve it. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Which is different from Ansel, because Ansel has experienced a lot of the same trauma, but she hadn't come to the same conclusion about the world that I think Celaena had or the other assassins have, right? And so that's why she does something that's such a huge betrayal. It's like you're turning against the wrong people just because you're so angry. But anyways, that ends chapter 6. And now we are moving on to chapter 7. So, of course, their little stunt wasn't going to go unnoticed. And upon arriving back, Ansel and Celaena are immediately summoned to speak with the master. As they kneel on the floor waiting for what the master will do, Celaena suddenly remembers what Sam had been yelling the night of Arobynn's punishment. He'd been screaming, "I'll kill you." Ugh, that makes me really sad.
Oh, I know. That line just undid me. Because I don't know why, for whatever reason, I can really vividly picture that whole scene in my mind. And I just picture Sam's beautiful face just like being held back. It's, "I'll kill you. I'll kill you." And it's like, he loves Celaena. He loves her. Well, I mean, I hope he does. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. And then it's extra sad because obviously we know what happens to Sam.
No, we don't. It's not real until I read it.
Yeah. But Ansel begins to explain why they took the horses, stating they'd only wanted to have some fun and that she can handle Lord Beric. Celaena only murmurs, "I'm sorry." Celaena also notes a bit of bitterness in Ansel's voice and realizes it probably wasn't easy for her to be there as the master refused to train her. And despite that, continued to act as mediator between the master and Beric after all these years. The master approaches Celaena and holds up her chin to steady her face. Celaena embraces herself for a physical blow, as Arobynn had done, but the master just gives her a sad smile and releases her. Celaena feels ashamed for thinking the master would hit them, but then considers that Ansel could get kicked out. And believing that Ansel needed this training more than her, she blurts out, "It was my idea," and makes it an excuse for why they took the horses. The master surprisingly just nods, and then somehow Ansel has the audacity to ask for stable duty as her punishment, which I was
She's
like,
bold.
girl,
You got to give
I
it to
know.
her.
That girl has no shame or guilt. But the master also nods in approval for this as well. They both then get up to leave, but the master stops Celaena and he signs to her. Ansel translates, "You're to report to him at sunset tomorrow for your first lesson." Celaena bows deeply and realizes that whatever she had said, somehow she'd proven herself to him at last.
Yeah, I took that really because he obviously knows Celaena's lying. He knows Ansel well enough
Yeah.
to know that she's trouble. And I think him seeing Celaena willing to sacrifice herself and or risk punishment, because I think the Mute Master knows that she's probably expecting physical punishment. And so for her to be willing to offer that up and to spare Ansel, I think is really indicative of Celaena's character to him. And that's why he decides to train her.
I was wondering why this was of all things, because the reasoning seemed kind of flawed to me. The master, of course, is like compassionate, truthful, and honest, but Celaena was defending something that fundamentally wasn't right and would cause trouble for the assassins later because, again, he knows that Ansel has been lying about a lot of things. And I guess just the idea of loyalty or something was maybe the bigger indicator, or just this general idea that you would risk your own life for somebody else.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was because Celaena had been demonstrated she'd been able to befriend Ansel when no one else really could, and like been able to breach a certain barrier with her. So I guess those things all combined were helpful. But I'll admit, when I first read this, I was like, Celaena, why are you doing that?
Oh,
I mean,
I see. So I can't
Yeah.
rely on you if we get in a jam, huh?
no, that's not true. You can. You know, honestly, I am mad at Ansel for the way that she betrayed them because I just feel like it's so misplaced. I was like, if you're going to be mad at somebody, like the people that treated you with kindness and compassion, housed you, fed you, trained you for 5 years of your fucking life when your family was dead and like never questioned you about it, just let you live and be totally fine. And then you turn around and gut your lover, which I guess now that we've brought up a little bit of weird stuff going on with Mikhail, like, okay, perhaps I can forget that. But like the Mute Master, you were just pissed at him that never trained you. And so now you're going to go off and kill all of them. I'm just
When you
like,
say
this
it
is
like
so
that.
ridiculous. And she gets off so fucking easy. And that's why I'm like, you better make up for this in a massive, massive fucking way later on in the book series, or we're going to have a problem. So,
Oh, yeah. You and Ansel are going to go at it?
yeah.
Yeah. I guess when you say it like that, yeah, you're right. It is. And I want to be clear. I don't think I was ever like, oh, no, it's totally fine what Ansel does. It's clearly not. But it's just, I am such a softie for any characters, even the bad ones, right? I don't know why I have this weird instinct that I'm like, Arobynn can't be bad, right? He just can't be. There has to be an explanation. I know he did a bad thing. That doesn't make him bad, right? And I feel like I have this, which don't get me wrong, Arobynn's not the best example, but the only characters who outright I was like, oh, are totally evil are Cain, Grave, and the King. Everyone else, I'm like, oh, but their story matters. You know, even Rolf, right? Rolf is like a bad person, but I feel like there's something good about him too. I just, my brain wants to hold on to the justification, the understanding of trauma, why people do the things that they do. And I know that's, you know, not always right, but
that's true.
It's hard for me. It's hard.
Sometimes I go that route, and other times I'm like, no,
fuck them.
Like, well, I'm like, you have a responsibility to learn or do better, right? Just because something bad happened to you.
Yeah.
Again, in the words of the Mute Master, some people learn to work through that and come out on the other side. Other people just harbor it in anger and they let that fester. And yeah, Ansel was the latter. So, but
you're right. You're right.
To move on from this Ansel situation, Celaena and Ansel spend the rest of the day cleaning all of the pens of the livestock, and by sunset, Celaena heads to the roof of the master's hall. She finds the master staring across the desert, and when she alerts him of her arrival, he points to a reed basket. And it turns out the basket has a black, hissing asp curled inside of it, and Celaena leaps away from it. The master communicates in what I'm interpreting to mean, stop being Courage the Cowardly Dog, and instead observe it, move with it.
Yeah, easier said than done. Snakes are a no for me. Hard no.
I actually don't. Well, I don't know what I would do. Typically, if I've ever seen a snake, it's like kind of far away from me. And so I'm not really that freaked out by it. But if it was like right next to me, I probably would feel differently. But
yeah.
Celaena is skeptical of this training, but with another encouraging indication from the master who signals, don't kill it, absorb, Celaena takes a deep breath and does just that. Over the next week, Celaena studies, observes, and embodies the essence of the asp until she could strike like the asp, swift and unflinching. She spends the next several days observing and training to move like bats and jackrabbits as well, and the rest of the weeks pass in a familiar cycle. She doesn't see Ansel much except at meals, though she notes Ansel was merry, almost gleeful, more and more with every passing day, though she never said why. We, of course, know that the girl was up to no good, but that is for Celaena to find out.
Shortly, very shortly.
Very soon. There were also no more attacks from Barrack, and in the quiet moments she had to herself, Celaena again thinks about Sam and how he threatened to kill Arobynn. She wonders what had changed in Skulls Bay to make Sam say such a thing, but she tries not to think about it too much. Chapter 8. We start off this chapter with Celaena and Ansel having a makeover girly pop moment, which I thought was very cute, but also sad because, again, Ansel's about to pull some shit. But it is Ansel's birthday and Midsummer Eve, and Celaena has done an excellent job with Ansel's makeup. She has one final week with the Silent Assassins, and that has left Celaena sad about her time here soon coming to a close, especially considering she now made who she considered to be her first ever female friend. Later that evening, all the assassins were gathered outside in the fortress courtyards for the festival, and Celaena is surprised to find total silence. Despite this, everybody was all smiles and people are dancing together. As Celaena drinks wine, she observes and reflects on a few things. She wishes she was training, though the master had insisted she attend the party, probably because he had wanted to go. She also watches Ansel dance with Mikhail, who definitely liked Ansel quite a bit, and that despite horrors Ansel had faced, she still managed to be carefree and full of life. She also thinks about Sam again, and that she felt Sam had looked at her sometimes the same way that Mikhail did with Ansel. Celaena also reveals that in 2 days after her beating from Arobynn, she'd used her savings to purchase her own apartment, hidden from the Assassin's Keep. She hadn't told anyone yet, but with each day she spent with the Silent Assassins, she felt more conviction in her decision to tell Arobynn she was moving out. Though she still owed him money, she didn't think there was a rule stating she had to live with him.
Yeah. So the apartment, obviously, little alarm bells there. Remember in Crown of Midnight when Kale is stooping in her room and he finds her will and he sees that she's left everything to him, including but not limited to an apartment in the slums of Rifthold. And
yes,
I can only imagine this is the same apartment. So I definitely want to go to that apartment. I want to see what's in there in this timeline and then also in the future. But yeah, that apartment. I'm like really keen on that. I'm like, what's in the apartment? What is the apartment for? I just like convinced there's something really big and special in there. And it's probably empty and decrepit and dusty, but I'm like, there has to be something.
Probably keeps all her money in there. Some of it. Yeah. But I do feel that we're just getting closer and closer to Celaena deciding she's going to break free of Arobynn. All of her experiences so far seem to be just converging in this decision. So Celaena is interrupted from her thoughts when Ilias convinces her to dance with him with a look that says, "Live a little, Sardothian." They proceed to have a lovely and silent night of dancing, and it wasn't until the very end of the night that Celaena finally turns in. Ilias walks with her back towards their room, and it can't be denied there was a little bit of attraction between them. They reach Celaena's room, and Ilias begins to make his move to kiss her, except at the last second, Celaena freezes and steps away. She's only got one boy on her mind, and it's definitely not Ilias. Celaena begins to babble about how a long-distance relationship just doesn't really work in this world, but Ilias just shrugs in understanding as if to say, if only we didn't live thousands of miles apart, but can you blame me for trying? And then he retreats to his own room. The next morning, Ansel stumbles into the stables later, still in her party clothes. Celaena teases her a bit, but the conversation turns more serious and a little bitter. Ansel reminds Celaena that not all of us can so easily convince the master to train us, and they begin bickering about their circumstances. The conversation does not end well, with Celaena telling Ansel the truth is, even if you go home and get what you want, no one will give a damn if you take back your speck of territory, because no one except you will even care. Rough.
Yeah, the ugly thing to say. It's a big one. Yeah, loads of bad luck for Celaena.
And then Ansel also responds not great, and she says, "You're just a spoiled, selfish bitch," before she stalks out of the stables.
It's not nice that she said that, but she's not entirely wrong. You know what I mean? Celaena hit way below the belt. Ansel shared something deeply personal to her. And for Celaena to say that, it's really awful.
Oh, right. It's really...
Yeah. But I do think in a way that scene is a callback to earlier in this story when she's thinking about Arobynn and how they're trained at the Assassin's Keep and that everyone's meant to be an enemy and words are just as deadly of a weapon as, blades. I think in a way that's almost instinctual for Celaena to respond and retaliate in that way because that's what she's been trained to do. So not that it excuses the behavior, but it does contribute to the circumstances of why she went for the nuclear verbal option.
Yes. At this point, it's pretty clear Ansel is desperate and has become increasingly frustrated with her lack of progress in training. And that ends chapter 8. Moving on to chapter 9. Later that evening, Celaena is too distracted for her lessons, and the master stops her to have her sit alongside him. The master raises his eyebrows at her, silently urging her to talk, but Celaena struggles to reveal her embarrassing fight with Ansel, so they sit in silence for a while. Eventually, Celaena says, "I'm scared to go home." And with the master's silent questioning, she goes on to state, "Everything will be different. Everything is already different. I think everything changed when Arobynn punished me, but some part of me still thinks that the world will go back to the way it was before that night, before I went to Skulls Bay. I'm not sure I want it to go back to the way it was before." The master only smiles at her reassuringly and then stands up and begins a series of almost meditative movements that Celaena soon joins him in. They continue with them together in silence until there was nothing left but the master and her as they greeted the new day.
It's a nice moment for them.
Yes, I think so too. I really like the silent master.
Me too.
He's a nice man.
He's nice.
An hour after the sun rose, Celaena creeps back to her rooms and collapses onto bed to sleep. Several hours later, she is awoken by Ansel.
Said, collapses on bed to sleep.
I didn't even notice.
When I'm doing a final pass, I'll catch something like that. And usually I can fix it. But that one was really funny. I don't know why. I think
I swear.
I have shoes.
I feel like I swear having headphones on and not being able to hear myself speaking as well messes with, I don't know. I catch myself not properly enunciating things sometimes. I feel like it's because I can't hear myself. I don't know.
No, it is hard. It does impact your ability to communicate. Well, that's why musicians, when they're in a booth, they have one ear covered so they can hear how it sounds and one so they can hear themselves.
That makes sense.
You need to Ariana Grande it. And one ear out.
Collapses onto the bed. Sorry, everybody. Several hours later, Celaena is awoken by Ansel, who informs her it's almost dinner, and then ends up apologizing to her. She says, "I shouldn't have said those things about you. I don't think you're spoiled or selfish. I'm sorry for what I said, too. I didn't mean it." Celaena notes that Ansel seems nervous, but the two friends reconcile for now. Ansel brings out 2 goblets of wine and makes a toast stating, "To making amends and fond memories. To being the most fearsome and imposing girls the world has ever seen." Celaena drinks the wine and immediately regrets it. She has 2 thoughts before she blacks out. First, Ansel's eyes were filled with sorrow, and second, the wine tasted strange.
And then the world went black.
That damn Gloriella.
I know. I was going to say something about that later. I'm like, she seems to have a problem with Gloriella. We know it comes up with Sam because that's discussed, and then later on. So I'm like,
she gets poisoned again. And
yeah.
well, I feel like they only have one paralyzing poison, and
I
that is
know.
Gloriella.
I'm like, that's all you have? You're like, nothing else in your repertoire? Go find
I will
Paylor and
say,
ask him.
I was gonna say, you think they would know to recognize it by now, considering it's like the only poison of this type.
I know.
I was like,
Oh
it's not
my
like you have to
gosh.
memorize like 5 different types. Come on now.
Seriously.
It should be easy for you.
You would think.
I feel like I talk about Celaena like I do sometimes when you're watching the Olympics, and you're just watching people make mistakes and you're like,
Yes.
why'd you mess up? But in
Oh my
reality, you're like,
God.
oh.
Okay. I mean, we're just so off topic, just whatever at this point. But I love all the memes and reels that come up every single Olympics. And it's like me and my couch, and it's like a really obese person with like a bag of chips on their belly and like a beer in their hand. You're like, pathetic. You're just like, but we all do it. Like, I love gymnastics. And I was watching with my husband last night. And so he was going to ask me some questions. And I am by no means an expert. And go see how our ankles are crossed. I'm like, she did a terrible job on that landing. Meanwhile, I can't even jump with 2 feet in the air at the same time, and I'm over here like, oh, weak. You didn't stick the landing. And you're like, oh, wait, maybe some perspective here. Yeah, I don't know. That's what it feels like. You're totally right.
Could I do 3 flips in the air? No. Am I qualified to judge it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. Yes.
That's what I do all the time to Celaena.
I think that's like the majority of people who watch the Olympics, You can't even fathom what it's like to compete on that level.
I know. That's the hard thing about watching people do things that they're really good at, is that they make it look easy.
Yes. Oh my God.
So then you're like, oh, it must be easy, when in reality, no.
Yes. I said the exact same thing about Simone Biles. I was watching her prelim, her subdivision she did on the vault. And I mean, it just looked effortless. And I'm like,
know.
It lulls you into this false sense of like, how hard can it be? And
then
you're like, oh yeah, she's literally the best in the entire world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyways, that ends chapter 9. Moving on to chapter 10. Celaena awakens later with a pounding headache. It's now nighttime, and she had ended up far outside the fortress with her bags of belongings and Casita. Though her sword is gone, she checks for her daggers and finds a scroll tucked into her belt. She reads the note, which was written by Ansel, and it says, I'm sorry it had to end this way. The master said it would be easier to let you go like this, rather than shame you by publicly asking you to leave early. Casita is yours, as is the master's letter of approval, which is in the saddlebag. Go ho. I will miss you, Ansel. Celaena immediately finds it odd that the master would let her go so close to the end of her time there anyway, but she wonders if perhaps she had offended the master in some way. She continues rifling through her bags and finds a sea green wax sealed letter. She contemplates if she should break the seal to read it and risk Arobynn finding out, but ultimately she wonders if she'd been wrong and that the master had just found her to be unworthy after all. Celaena recalls that for the first time in a while, she had a place where she felt like she belonged, where she might learn something more than deceit and how to end lives. But she blows out her lantern and continues riding into the night. Celaena continues riding towards Xandria, and the next day she spies 200 of Lord Beric's men marching, and Celaena quickly realizes they must be heading toward the fortress. Celaena again wonders why the master would have sent her away, but she ultimately decides to stay out of it, thinking if the master didn't want anything to do with her, then she certainly didn't need to warn them. We all know that this is a bad sign, and Celaena is just licking her wounds at this supposed betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, girl, you should have turned your horse around right away. But
I know it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, you're so smart. You put all these things together and you see trouble and your instinct is to just continue on. That is the only plot hole is not right. But like the only thing in the story, I'm like, really?
It seems uncharacteristic of her.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird.
The next morning, Celaena makes it to an oddly quiet Xandria and buys herself passage on a ship that would sail across the Gulf of Oro to Melisande. With a few hours to kill before her ship departs, Celaena again contemplates why Beric's men would be marching toward the silent assassins and the strange circumstances that had led to her early dismissal from her training. Suddenly, a chill snakes down Celaena's spine as she realizes what's going on. She pulls out Ansel's note and the supposed letter of approval, and when she tears it open, it's completely blank. Celaena realizes Ansel must have stolen the master's seal ring, takes one to know one, and that she had drugged her. She also puts together that the meeting Ansel had with Beric had really been a conspirators' meeting. Celaena has no time to waste, so she jumps back on Casita and takes off toward the fortress. Chapter 11.
Ooh, getting good.
Celaena and Casita are flying through the desert and through the night until they reach the fortress. By this point, fires were everywhere, and the assassins and Beric soldiers were battling it out, and Celaena notes the gates themselves show no sign of forced entry, as if someone had left them unlocked. Celaena carefully creeps inside, noting all the piles of ash, and that somehow most of Beric's soldiers had gotten inside with few casualties on the outside, which only meant someone must have let them in. She quickly realizes the master was nowhere to be found, and she sprints into the building and through the halls to find him. She encounters a soldier in the stairs toward the master's room, but she quickly defeats him. She then flings open the doors to the room and finds Mikhail dead on the floor, and next to him, alive but bleeding badly from his sliced stomach, is Ilias. Ilias points her toward the room ahead where she sees Ansel standing above the master who laid paralyzed on the floor. The master and her make eye contact, and just as Ansel is about to cut the master's head off, Celaena throws her knife straight at Ansel's forearm. She's lucky she's got good aim, that's for sure.
I know, because you could easily be just trying to disarm and then end up killing,
Yeah.
You really gotta trust her aim.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, Ansel and Celaena begin combating each other. Ansel is aiming for the master, and then Celaena knocks her out of the way. Celaena whispers why to Ansel, who reveals that Lord Beric promised her 1,000 soldiers to march into the Flatlands in exchange for the master's head. And obviously, we know Beric wanted this to buy his own favor back with the King of Waterland. Ansel continues to reveal that with Beric's troops, she could exact her revenge against High King Locke. Ansel makes a move for the master again, but Celaena throws her second dagger to stop her. Celaena urges Ansel not to do it, stating, I know what it feels like. I know how it feels to have this kind of hate, and this isn't the way. Ansel continues on, stating that men destroy everything, and then offers that Celaena go with her where the two of us alone could conquer the Flatlands. Celaena just says, I can't go with you, and you know it, so take your troops and leave, Ansel. Ansel strikes again. Celaena intercepts, leading them into another round of combat, and Ansel manages to get Celaena down on the ground without a weapon. She begins questioning Ansel about who killed Mikhail and everything that occurred to distract Ansel as she inches toward her dagger. Of course, it was Ansel who had killed Mikhail, drugged the master, and left the gates open for Beric's men. Meanwhile, the master has been motioning to Celaena for her to strike, just as she learned with the asp. So she does. She slams into Ansel and knocks her sword out of her hand and then pins Ansel to the ground, sword at the back of her neck. Celaena has a brief moment of grief for their friendship and asks, was it ever real? Ansel replies, there were some moments when it was. The moment I sent you away was real. In the background, they hear the cries to signal the assassins had won, and Celaena realizes they'd kill Ansel if they found her. So she tells Ansel, you have 5 minutes to pack your things and leave the fortress, because in 20 minutes, I'm going up to the battlements and I'm going to fire an arrow at you, and you'd better hope that you're out of range by then. She lets Ansel up, hands her back her father's sword, and then tells her to go home. Then Ansel sprints off, leaving a path of destruction in her wake.
Ooh, that was such a good action-filled chapter. You feel the tension, you're really nervous, and it really does seem like for a brief period of time that Ansel's going to best her. I'm like, oh shit, how is Celaena going to get out of it? I didn't think she'd be able to. I actually thought it would be like Ilias was able to make himself stand and killed her from behind or something while Celaena distracted her. So I was kind of surprised how it all worked out.
I think the only reason that it did work was because Ansel actually felt like Celaena was a friend.
Well,
I
they
think
are
that
friends.
gave,
Yeah, they love each other.
yeah, and I think that was the only thing that caused her to pause and actually explain to Celaena, because it seemed like otherwise, if she was anybody else, she just would have like cut off the head and been done with it. But
yeah,
That ends chapter 11. And now we are on to the final chapter, chapter 12. Celaena quickly moves to help Ilias with his wound, and she shouts for help. 5 assassins come in to help, and Celaena sniffs at the goblet of wine. She realizes that it was laced with Gloriella and calls for an antidote to give to the master. The assassins carry Ilias out, and then Celaena sits by the master, who looks at her and then to the door to remind her of the promise she'd made to Ansel. Ansel was well off in the distance as she headed northwest toward Briarcliff Beyond. Celaena takes aim and fires one arrow toward Ansel and watches as it buries itself just inches behind the horse's hooves. It's revealed that Celaena had waited 21 minutes before firing. Crazy. Again, when I first read this, I was like just really mad at Ansel. And so I was like, oh, she totally should have just restrained Ansel and let the assassins decide what to do with her.
Mm-hmm.
But after rereading it, I was like, all right, I guess it was a compassionate thing to do. And knowing Celena's background, she empathizes with Ansel and everything.
But see, even the Mute Master doesn't want his assassins to know that Ansel was behind it because it would upset them and hurt them, right? And I think the Mute Master recognizes that Ansel has many facets. I think it was real for her sometimes where they really were friends and she thought maybe this could be my life and this could be okay. And so I think that's maybe why I feel so conflicted. Obviously, it's not okay. I don't condone that, the trickery.
Yeah.
People died because of her choices. But I want to give Ansel the benefit of the doubt. And Ansel, also, she's 18. She's so young. She's so young. And I just think about all the dumb decisions I made. Obviously, they did not have deadly consequences, but it's hard for me sometimes, I guess, just to condemn them. I'm like, well, you fucked up one time and you're done.
That's true.
I just especially when her story is so sad.
I always think about all the decisions that I made before my prefrontal cortex developed. Or like fully matured, I should say. It's been there, but
Yeah.
She was not mature yet.
The decisions
until the age of
make
26. I know.
now that my prefrontal cortex developed.
But the next morning, Celaena is summoned to the master's chamber. We are all shocked to learn that the man can in fact speak. He says, I am glad you did not kill Ansel. I've been wondering when she would decide what to do with her fate. He then reveals he'd known for years that Ansel was lying about her family and that he'd learned they were dead when he'd investigated himself. The master had hoped that Ansel would trust him enough to tell her and that she'd learn to endure her pain. He says, if you can learn to endure pain, you can survive anything. Some people learn to embrace it, to love it. Some endure it through drowning in sorrow or by making themselves forget. Others turn it into anger. But Ansel let her pain become hate and let it consume her until she became something else entirely. I really like that quote, and I think it perfectly sums up the difference between positively dealing with negative events in your life and the consequences of not finding healthy ways to reframe and move forward from a negative experience.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that quote is very intentional. And I think that we're supposed to apply it to Ansel's experience, but also Celaena's and how she handles all the things that have happened to her, right? I feel like that's a really big theme for her in Calm after the death of Nehemia. She's angry. She's very angry. And it manifests in different ways. And I think that's going to continue to be a theme as Celaena's character progresses and develops in the series. I have a feeling we'll be referencing this quote in the future.
It's just so widely applicable into real life, too.
Yes.
It's one of those ones that you just remember for forever. Celaena asks if he will tell the others about Ansel's actions, but the master says no, because I would spare them that anger. Many believed Ansel was their friend, and part of me, too, believes that at times she was. The master goes on to state that he believes she was the first person Ansel had ever considered a friend, and that she will likely leave a lasting imprint on Ansel's heart. You spared her life and returned her father's sword. She will not soon forget that. The master then gives Celaena his letter of recommendation for her. Celaena then also asks why he's finally speaking to her out loud, and he replies, I choose to be silent most of the time, and I've become so used to it that I often forget I have the capacity for speech. Before they part ways, the master offers Celaena several things. First, he tells her she will always have a home with the silent assassins if she ever chooses to leave the north. Second, he gives her trunks full of gold as repayment for saving his life and sparing Ansel's. And last, he says, when you give your master this letter, also tell him that in the Red Desert, we do not abuse our disciples. Boom. Mic drop from the master.
From the master.
Celaena responds, I think I can manage that. And then for the first time in a long time, feels she heard the song of the northern wind calling her home, and she was not afraid.
I felt like she was going to Terracin and not Rifthold.
I know. This really was a beautiful story. It was a journey of emotions from joy at the idea of Celaena's new friendship to pure anger for me at Ansell's betrayal of everyone.
I know.
And then finally to hope again that one day everything will change for the better.
Yeah. No, it's a great story. I'm really excited to see where we go next. I mean, I know we go back to Rifthold, but I mean like for Celaena's character and everything. And I'm desperate for Sam to come back. Like, please.
I know.
I think you will.
I think you will too. I think we're definitely going to get, all the final sequences and the things that take place before Celaena gets captured. So I don't want to read about Sam dying, though. I feel like that's going to be really hard to read.
Yeah, I think I'm going to cry on that episode. We'll see.
Okay. Anyways, well, that rounds out our analysis. And now we just have our favorite moments left to share. So, Addison, what were your favorite moments?
Oh, thank you for asking. So my first favorite moment is when Celaena and Ansel are making their way to Xander for the first time. And Celaena's just complaining about everything. It's hot and there's sand everywhere. And Ansel responds with, are you sure you're actually Celaena Sardathian? I don't think she'd be this fussy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, she's like, I can endure it. Doesn't even have to like it, And I'm like, I get that. It was just funny. And then I don't know what it was about this scene, but I really enjoyed the scene with the spider silk merchant. There was just something about that scene that just left like an air of mystique and intrigue. And I'm like, who is this man? Why am I reading this? Like, why is this important? And I don't know. I liked it a lot. Then I like after they steal the Asterian horses and then they are finally free from the guards. And as soon as they got the horses, Celaena just punches Ansel right in the face.
Yeah.
She's like, how fucking dare you? I think she even has a line that's like, how dare she make decisions on her behalf? She was Celaena Sardathian. Ireland's greatest assassin. Ugh. You get that line a lot in this story. I'm like, okay, we get it. We get it. But, and then I really like when they're putting on the makeup for the party and Ansel says, you mean to tell me you do this every day?
I know.
And Celaena's like, yeah, it's fun twice a day. And Ansel's like, fun? Smearing all the skunk on your face is fun? And I don't know why, but I just live with their country accent. It's just so funny. And like, bro, I like to have makeup on. I like to have my makeup done. I hate putting makeup on.
Yeah.
I hate putting makeup on. I'm so lazy about it. I'm just like,
I like to put it on. I don't like taking it off, though.
Same.
It's kind of fun to put it on and you're like, oh, I feel nice. Like, this is great. But then, taking it off, I'm so tired because usually it's like nighttime or something. I just want to go to bed.
I know. But dude, even my children, like when I'm putting makeup on, they're like, Mommy, why are you painting your face? Because I just never do it. So they're just like,
who are you?
Yeah. I will say my oldest, she's pretty sharp and she's like, Mommy, you have on lipstick. Does that mean you're recording for the podcast? And I'm like, be quiet and go play with your toys. Go observe somebody else.
That's so funny.
She always knows.
That's hilarious.
So anyway, what were your favorite moments?
There was a lot of funny one-liners and like sassy remarks from everybody in this little scene. So I liked a lot of it. It was a fun read and it was really exciting. But I just picked 3. So I love when she's peeking around Ansel's stuff and she thinks who folds their underwear. And then she's also thinking about Sam and she's like, he probably folds his underwear too.
Yeah. That's a great one. I can't believe I forgot that one.
It was so funny. And then I love the whole Asterian horse escape just because I thought it was really exciting. I like the horses. I feel like the horses are really cool.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. So I hope she gets an Asterian horse back at some point.
I want her to get Casita back.
Yeah. What happened? Is Casita just like living?
I think she stays at the keep.
At the keep. Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense. I was wondering if she would see her again or get her back at some point, but
I hope so.
yeah. And then I also liked at the end when the master says, if you can learn to endure pain, you can survive anything. Some people learn to embrace it, to love it. Some endure it through drowning it in sorrow or by making themselves forget. Others turn it into anger. And again, we talked about this one already, but I just thought it was
Yeah.
very beautiful, extends to real life quote as well. So,
Yeah, I agree.
and now that concludes our episode. So, thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of the Booktown Fantasy podcast. If you're loving this show, then definitely check us out on social media through the links below. And that's all we've got for you guys today. Stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you next week for Assassin's Blade episode 4. Bye.
Bye.
We will be discussing why do I have so many typos? Okay. I feel like I'm gonna get goofy at some point.
Hold on. Stupid fucking. Somehow I triggered Siri.
Oh.
She said, I have nothing on my calendar, if that's what you're asking. God, Siri every time.
Oops. I said Siri and she heard me too.
She's listening. While giving by doing, oh my gosh. And doing, oh my gosh. Ugh. Okay, I'm just, oh my God, Lorraine, we're so fucked. We're fucked. At least a blooper for this one will be good. But of course, our girl kicks some hands. Kicks some hands. That's literally what I wrote. Kicks some ass.
There was a pale line around one of his fingers, perhaps where a wedding wing. That mathing. Did I write that down right? And the next day, she sees spies. 200.
She spies 200.
I don't know what I was saying.